Hello, everyone. Today we will explore some of the most shocking criminal cases in the United States, where the truth behind each story not only causes shock, but also raises many questions about justice and ethics. Let's dive deep into each case to understand more clearly what really happened. Woman, the case of Kenneth Eugene Smith, Alabama. In 1980, quiet town in Alabama, a brutal murder took place, shaking the entire community. The victim was Elizabeth Dorleen Sennett, the wife of Pastor Charles Sennett Sr. She was murdered viciously in her own home. Immediately, the police quickly began their investigation and discovered signs of a potential robbery at the crime scene. However, there was no clear evidence of stolen property, leading them to suspect that the case might be connected to a family member or someone close to the victim's circle. As the investigation progressed, the police received a tip from the Crime Stoppers program suggesting that Kenneth Eugene Smith and John Forrest Parker might be involved in the case. When questioned, both men confessed that they had been hired to kill Elizabeth for $1,000 each. The mastermind behind this plan was none other than the victim's husband, Pastor Charles Sennett Sr., who was facing financial difficulties and sought to benefit from his wife's life insurance policy. Soon after, Kenneth Eugene Smith was sentenced to death and executed on January 25th, 2024, using nitrogen hypoxia, marking the first time this method was used in U.S. history. This execution became one of the most shocking cases of that period in the United States, drawing significant attention due to the unprecedented method of execution and the disturbing nature of the crime. The case raised further questions about the application of the death penalty and the use of experimental execution methods. Thomas Eugene Creech case, Idaho. In 1981, while serving a life sentence, Creech killed a fellow inmate, David Dale Jensen, by brutally beating him. This action led to his death sentence. Thomas Eugene Creech is a name that haunts American crime history. Born in 1950 in Ohio, Creech claimed to have committed 42 murders across the United States, although only 5 were confirmed and convicted. And Creech was arrested in 1974 after killing 2 painters in Idaho. During interrogation, he confessed to numerous other murders across the United States, including contract killings and religious rituals. However, many of Creech's confessions have been questioned and only a few have been confirmed. In 1981, while serving a life sentence, Creech killed a fellow inmate, David Dale Jensen, by brutally beating him. This action led to his death sentence. After years of appeals and delays, Idaho scheduled Creech's execution on February 28, 2024. However, due to the inability to find a suitable vein for lethal injection, the execution was postponed. A new execution was scheduled for November 13, 2024, but was further delayed by a stay from a federal court to review Creech's legal claims. Case 3. The case of Ivan Cantu, Texas. In November 2000, a shocking double murder occurred in Texas that sent ripples of horror through the local community. The victims were James Mosqueda and his fiancée, Amy Kitchen, both of whom were shot dead in their own home. The brutality of the crime stunned everyone who knew the couple, as they had been well-liked and were in the prime of their lives. The crime scene itself was gruesome. Both victims were found in the house, and it was clear from the outset that the murder was not a random act, but a targeted execution. The police quickly began their investigation, and soon suspicions pointed to one person, Ivan Cantu, the cousin of James Mosqueda. Cantu was arrested after police discovered physical evidence that linked him directly to the crime scene. Bloodstains were found on a pair of jeans that he was wearing when arrested, and this, along with a statement from his ex-fiancée, Amy Betcher, placed him near the scene of the crime. Prosecutors argued that Cantu's motive for the murders was robbery, suggesting that he sought to steal cash, drugs, and a valuable Rolex watch from the victims. However, the investigation was not without its complications. Despite the seemingly strong evidence, there were issues that raised doubts about the case. Some of the testimony presented in court was contested. Butcher's testimony, which was a significant part of the prosecution's case, was later called into question, leading to arguments about the fairness of the trial. Additionally, there were concerns over the reliability of the blood evidence, as some experts argued that it was inconclusive. The defense team argued that Cantu was not guilty and that the evidence presented was circumstantial at best. They raised the possibility that Cantu had been wrongly implicated in the crime and that there might have been another explanation for the evidence found at the scene. The possibility of a wrongful conviction loomed over the case, especially as Cantu continued to maintain his innocence. Despite the doubts and emerging new evidence, Ivan Cantu was convicted and sentenced to death. His execution was scheduled for February 28, 2024. The case garnered significant attention due to the controversial nature of the conviction and the execution, especially considering the lingering questions surrounding the fairness of the trial. On the day of the execution, Ivan Cantu was administered lethal injection at the Texas State Penitentiary. For many, the execution was seen as a necessary step in delivering justice for the victims, especially given the brutal nature of the crime. However, others remained uneasy about the case, questioning whether the death penalty was truly justified, given the possibility of errors in the trial process. In the days following Cantu's execution, his case continued to spark debates about the use of the death penalty in the United States, particularly in cases where there were doubts about the defendant's guilt. His case was seen by some as an example of the flaws in the justice system, where mistakes could have irreversible consequences. The execution of Ivan Cantu highlighted the ongoing debate about the death penalty and its effectiveness as a form of punishment. Advocates of the death penalty argued that it serves as a deterrent to violent crime, while critics of capital punishment raised concerns about its potential for miscarriages of justice. Cantu's case also brought attention to the flaws in the legal process, particularly in death penalty cases. It reminded the public of the potential for wrongful convictions and the importance of ensuring that every defendant receives a fair trial. The uncertainty surrounding Cantu's guilt led many to question whether the legal system, in its pursuit of justice, had instead made a tragic mistake. For those who believed in Cantu's innocence, his execution was seen as a tragic and irreversible act, symbolizing the deep flaws within the criminal justice system. For others, it was seen as the end of a long and painful chapter of justice, where the victims' families could find some form of closure, but the moral and ethical questions about the fairness of the death penalty remain unresolved. The case of Ivan Cantu serves as a stark reminder of the complexity and controversy surrounding the death penalty in America. While his execution may have brought closure to some, it also left many questions unanswered about the fairness of the judicial process. His case continues to be a symbol of the tensions between justice, punishment, and the potential for error in the legal system. As debates continue, Ivan Cantu's story remains a tragic reflection of the high stakes involved in the death penalty process, where one mistake could result in a life being lost forever. The question remains, did justice truly prevail in Cantu's case, or was it a tragic miscarriage of justice? Case 4. The case of David Renteria, the demon in human skin. The case of David Renteria is one of the most shocking and controversial in U.S. criminal justice history. From the brutal crime to the lengthy legal battles, this case has left a deep impact on the public. On November 18, 2001, in El Paso, Texas, 5 days before Thanksgiving, 5-year-old Alexandra Flores was shopping with her family at a Walmart. During the confusion in the store, Renteria kidnapped young Alexandra. He strangled her and set her body on fire. Alexandra's body was found the next morning, about 8 kilometers from the crime scene. Renteria, age 32, had a criminal record for child molestation and was on probation when he committed the crime. Police quickly identified him as the primary suspect thanks to fingerprints and other physical evidence at the scene. During the trial, Renteria admitted to his crime and expressed remorse. Despite several appeals and delays, on November 16, 2023, Renteria was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville prison in Texas. The case sparked significant debate about the fairness of the criminal justice system. Many question whether the death penalty truly brings justice or if it is simply an act of vengeance. Additionally, the prolonged trial process and appeals raised concerns about the effectiveness and costs of the legal system. Before his execution, Renteria apologized to the victim's family and expressed regret for his actions. He said, "To the victims of the family, there is not a day that goes by that I do not think about that fateful event of that day and what transpired." The case of David Renteria is not just about crime and punishment, but also a reminder of the limitations and challenges within the criminal justice system. It raises questions about justice, vengeance, and humanity in modern society. These 4 cases are 4 pieces of a dark puzzle about the death penalty in the U.S. We, the people living in this society, must reflect on the tough questions they raise. Are we on the right path in our pursuit of justice, or are we lost in the maze of brutality? The answer lies within the conscience of each individual. Stay tuned as we continue to update you with new cases and expose the crimes, diving deep into the complex issues of justice. Thank you for joining us, and don't forget to keep reflecting on the impact of these cases on society.